And now I'm very pleased to welcome our next moderator, Jonathan Steuer, and his expert panelists who will dig a little deeper into some of the technical and data considerations in this whole issue of TV data interoperability and ID resolution. If you can say that, fast a few times, it's a tongue twister. So Jonathan is the EVP of TV strategy and currency at VideoAmp, but he was a consultant to CIMM during this project with EY over the summer after leaving OMG before going to VideoAmp. So welcome to Jonathan and his panelists.
Hey, thank you, Jane. And, it's been interesting going from being a user of and then of these products and services from the buy side and then working with the Future of TV project to now trying to create some of the solutions that sort out what CIMM has been looking for that Jane talked about up front, and that that we saw in Adam's wheel. I am very pleased and honored to be joined by four of my friends and longtime colleagues in this marketplace: Claudio Marcus, who's the VP of Strategy at Comcast Advertising; Zeev Neumeier, who is recently moved into the role of Chief Innovation Officer at VIZIO; Mike Dean, who's the SVP of Advanced Advertising at ViacomCBS; and David Levy, who's the Chief Executive Officer at OpenAP. And we've all been, I miss hanging out with all of you at conferences and offsites and in various bars, and I very much look forward to the day that we'll get to do that again soon. I also want to apologize in advance if you hear the sound of things being smashed or drilled or sawed. There apparently is some demolition work that just started in the apartment above me. So that's not part of the panel. It's just a thing that's happening. And I do not have a dog. I just want to set this up by saying, we're going to try to focus here not on the broader solutions in the marketplace like the ANA WFA that are shooting for linking together everything in the world, including search and social and display, but really focusing on solutions that encompass the premium TV and video space. So we're only boiling a little part of the ocean, and specifically, talking about how our various participants are involved in planning, buying, and measuring across linear, data-driven, linear, over-the-top, connected TV, addressable, VOD, all those sort of fancy premium video things that show up on the TV set. So let me toss out the first question here. I'd like each of you to talk about what you're doing today to enable audience-based planning within your specific ecosystems. How you're doing addressable and linear, and how you're working on attribution. So like what you're doing that's working and what your general approach is. Let's start with Zeev, shall we?
Hey, by the way, Jonathan, we particularly missed the bars part.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid to disappoint you just a little bit. I'm usually the entertainment in a lot of these panels. In the past, I've come and I've always railed against people not using enough ACR data or not using enough data at all. And we've gotten to the point where I'm running out of people to make fun of, because ACR data is quickly becoming ubiquitous and everybody's using it. And also, we're like, I don't really have very much to rail against, because I don't want to jinx it, but the data piece of this is solved-ish, right? I mean, there's a little bit left to go, but for the most part, the data is available. The market has it. If you want the data, if you want to use it, it's there. And so I don't have anybody left to make fun of, right? What we are doing, of course, is now using the data more, both ourselves and allowing our customers to use it and allowing the ecosystem to use it, right? But like, at least for the first time in a while, we can say that foundational layer is there. And if you ain't using it by now, you got nobody to blame except for yourself. So, I mean, you've seen what VIZIO is doing with things like Project O, but if you think about it, those are things that are building on top of. We've created a foundational layer, everybody can use, everybody can use that. We're eating our own dog food, other people are eating it as well. For the most part, to quote the former president, mission accomplished. Now, that didn't come to bite him in the back, so I'm sure it won't come back to bite me.
So you are still the entertainment. You're just setting yourself up to be laughed at instead of with. I respect that. Claudio?
Well, I would say, first of all, I agree that at least within different businesses, this is a problem that's been tackled and or at least heavily worked on. So within Comcast advertising, we've been enabling data-driven audience-based planning, targeting, and attribution for a few years now. And then on the addressable front, we've had addressable technology on local ad avails for a handful of years. And so really what's changing now is that we're moving from using data more internally focused to now working with partners on the programmer side, collaborations on the on MVPD front, and also collaborations on the smart TV ACR data front. So I think that I would agree with Zeev that we've made a lot of progress. However, I would say that there's still quite a bit to go in terms of how do we do it on a cross-publisher basis. So.
Excellent. Mike, you're in the interesting position of trying to solve this across two separate organizations or formerly separate organization. How's it going?
Look, I mean, as a programmer on the panel, I'm happy to say that a lot is working well. And Jonathan, yes, we are bringing together two companies, two different ad technology environments, but we've made incredible progress there. And I would say, you know, audience-based activation, it's at the very heart of what we're doing with Vantage, our advanced TV platform. Every one of those deals is audience-based. Most of those deals are cross-platform, inclusive of connected TV and of addressable TV. I'm happy to say we have the largest addressable footprint of 41 million households across live, linear, and VOD, and we delivered the very first ever addressable impressions in live national broadcast. All of that, of course, is underpinned by data and data interoperability. And in terms of how we bring it to market from a practical standpoint, we first start with a data-driven linear plan that's built against viewership data from Nielsen or Comscore. Oftentimes we get that data, and preferably we get it through OpenAP and through our integrations with that platform. Once we've built that DDL plan, we're then building a complementary one-to-one targeted plan using the exact same audience. We're doing that through a proprietary cross-platform optimizer. And the IDs that result, those one-to-one IDs that result from that optimization, are then delivered to every execution point via an ID crosswalk. So, you know, the good news is today there is process and there's technology that allows us to plan and to activate a single audience on all platforms across both units and impressions. These are certainly not perfect solutions. There are a lot of gaps that we'll talk about in a moment, but it's largely a good news story.
Excellent. Mr. Levy, you're the last candidate here, and you've gotten shout outs from both Mike and Denise as trying to sort of link together their worlds. And I know we on the VideoAmp side are super happy to be working with you guys as well. What's in your new world and what's working?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing to start with, as everyone else said, is this is already happening, right? Like the idea of this far future where you can actually transact television campaigns on advanced audiences,
like up above where you zeroed out Delphine's role,
that's happening. So I mean, look, transactions guarantees on custom audiences today north of $1 billion already, and it's continuing to grow. I think what we're kind of working on right now is how do we make it as easy to buy a custom audience as it is to buy a demo campaign today. And so, you know, there is some complexity with setting up an advanced audience with each network individually. And previously that kind of, you know, led a lot of buyers to activate with only one publisher at a time. So at OpenAP is doing a lot of different things, but I think at its core, we were created and we focus on basically reducing that complexity or that operational burden. So essentially buyers are coming to us centrally. We do the audience onboarding so that, and then can share it with multiple publishers seamlessly so that everyone is working off the exact same custom segment when they're building and guaranteeing their campaign.
I wish you'd been further along with this when I was trying to get my teams at OMG to sync up their planning and buying and measurement across all the different networks, because certainly it was not fun before. So if you're making it easier and more ubiquitous, that is awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so that was the good news. Now, what's still a work in progress, I'd also like to just sort of set that up with everybody, because we all know there are some holes and everyone sort of referred broadly to what's missing. What's the biggest hole that you wish you could fill sooner rather than later? And Mike, I think we agreed to start with you to describe your 2021 wish list, other than getting to go to bars again.
I mean, we're past dry January, so yes, now we can get back there if only.
No CES, so it was actually feasible this year.
No kidding, right? So yeah, in the last section, I spoke about our ability to use a single audience target on every platform optimized, right? All good news, but there are of course very real limitations. Today, it's simply not possible for ViacomCBS or for any cross-platform national TV programmer to actually report to a client who we reached how many times on which platforms, and to do that deterministically at person or household level, because we're delivering across live traditional TV, VOD, DVR, virtual MVPDs, connected TV, addressable. Nothing brings all of those together. I would say we can't let our desire for that perfect solution prevent us from doing the best of what we have and while we work in parallel. And so just to give an example, we're working with Claudio and the Comcast team today through the SIP platform to understand unduplicated incremental reach within a single source footprint. So we're only doing that within Comcast, not nationally, but that's the best we have today. And that's a great example that I think we can take forward in terms of how we evolve. We also work with vendors who are Inscape and ACR data licensees to understand who's been exposed versus not, and look at the different uplift in KPIs and feed that back into our bi-weekly optimization. So I think those are some of the ways that we're bridging what the deficiencies are. But the wish list, what we really need is some type of ubiquitous tuning and metadata. And I'll say tuning, not viewing, because we all know that it's really, all we can tell today is what's on the screen, not necessarily who's viewing it. And that could be things like ad ID, the taxi watermark, maybe the OR watermark. I don't know. Zeev would know much better than I would. A real common notion of household and person level identity. And I think just between those two things, we get to questions of like what, where, who, and how they're viewing. And then lastly, I'll say a technology spine. So basically something that is in terms of a technology platform that supports privacy and privacy compliance and business rules for data sharing. We, along with Comcast, are partners in BlockRAF as are others, and we think that could be an important part of it too.
A solid list, and a lot of it does actually point back to Adam's wheel, which is not surprising. So I feel like we're playing Trivial Pursuit, and we're just trying to sort of put the little pies in to cover it all up eventually, and we're getting there. David, you alluded to some of your wish list items, the things you want to be able to do, the things you're looking to be able to do in the coming weeks, months, years. What's at the top of your list?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is, I don't know if there's been a year where you have so much agreement around what the top priority is, and this year is probably more so than any other. I mean, cross-platform measurement is number one on everyone's list. Buy side, sell side, technology, data partners, everybody's kind of focused on the same thing. I think today we're doing advanced audience campaigns with every day, but we're still having the a delivery for linear, delivery for digital, and those things being separate and not really having a notion, right, of who was reached across those things. Mike, I think, hit the perfect note. We've been all talking about this on different panels for years now, and I think part of our problem is we continually try to think about what's this perfect solution. And I think if anything, this year we should all get around the idea that we can't wait for perfect. We've got to move now. And what can we do now? And so our belief is that collectively, the networks have a ton of power and capability to actually enable cross-platform use cases. And so what we're really focused on is, bringing networks together and enabling them to collaborate around those buy-side use cases. And we think that's going to happen sooner than later. And we really feel like a standardized approach and an open approach to identity and measurement is the key. And look, we're really optimistic that we're going to see some big movement within this year.
That would certainly be great, and I agree that that's one of the big obstacles. Costa, Claudio, I know you and I share a passion for solving for the thing about how do we get down to measuring actual humans versus devices. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that I do agree with what Mike and David have put already on the wish list. Those are very important things. To add a bit, I do think that moving from household level to person level viewing assignment is critical, both in terms of making things more relevant, both for the consumer, but also for the marketer. And also to better understand the co-viewing that takes place. We know that there's a fair amount of co-viewing that takes place both in television and connected TVs, and we need to be able to account for that so that we can get a fair value exchange. And then, and speaking of value exchange, I think that there's another wish list item that I would throw out there for the industry, which is I think we need to establish a value exchange around the uses of the data that enable things like deduplication and incremental reach and frequency capping and things like that. Because I think we all agree that there is value there for both the consumer, the marketer, and the publishers, but we need to come up with a way that we can agree on how that value exchange happens so that we can move to market with solutions that really are cross-publisher around those items.
I couldn't agree more than that. More about that, and it reminds me of a conversation we had in a little conference room at Visible World back when I was at TiVo. So it's always nice to remember we're still doing the same thing, but now it's actually happening.
We've made a lot of progress since. I mean, I want to credit the progress too.
It went from an idea to a thing that's happening, I think, to the point a couple folks made at the beginning. And that's definitely nice to see. Zeev, I know you also had a point of view on this. Would you like to?
I propose, and this is the year of sequels, I propose we make a movie for 2020, Dr. Strangelove, 2020. How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Embrace the Good Enough. To just underscore what everybody said, don't let the good enough be the enemy of the perfect. There is a ton of stuff that we can do, a ton of stuff that we are already doing, right? If we just let go of some of these paranoias, for lack of a better word, that we've been hanging on to and just embrace the change, there's a lot of stuff we can do. Just to underscore something that Mike said, I think is super important. We are spending a ton of energy on metadata. Right, there are perfectly good metadata databases, for lack of a better word, out there. Right, just pick one, damn it, and standardize on it. Right, something like Ad ID is just a good idea. It's not inventing anything new here, guys. Right, just use it. Right, or anything else. It doesn't really make a difference. Right, it's one of those things. Is like it's there, it's available. Right, it's not going to be perfect. Right. And so, even things like we know what screens are watching what, right? You can link that between linear and digital. Okay, so you don't know who's sitting on the couch. So there's a co-viewing factor that you apply it. Okay, so, but you can still use it. So use it, right? And so I think that 2020 forced a lot of change in a good way. It forced, the dogs are eating dog food. And it forced us to just use the stuff that's there. And I think it's extremely positive. And we're seeing the stuff actually getting used. And what more can you ask for?
Excellent. So final question. In the world of the Future of TV CIMM project in Adam's Wheel, we talked a lot about centralized versus decentralized data models. And I know Denise mentioned we need sort of standardized ways of doing things. I'd love to hear from all of you about whether you think, is a common framework good enough? Can we say, here are how the pieces fit together and have it be a decentralized world with competitive players? Or do there need to be, an absolute set of standards where everyone's using absolutely the same data and the same methodology and all that stuff? So on the other hand, in other words, is this about enabling buyers and sellers to decide how they want to do it and leaving flexibility? Or is it about sort of the single currency and operational process of the future? Only got a few minutes left, Zeev.
Sure. If I gave you a machine that turns shit into gold right now, and it's got an 85% efficiency, but if I work on it for 5 more years, I can bring it up to 90% efficiency. What would you like to do? Use it now or wait for 5 years?
Now.
Yeah, it's like, I don't see a universe where a centralized standard comes around in time for us to use. There's an oligarchy of standards right now. Just use them. Right? It's not going to get centralized. You don't want it to really get centralized. Just use what's there. It'll be fine.
Cool, David.
Yeah, I think for identity, I would say that in any transaction or campaign, you're going to have some standards around what the sell side's using, what the buy side's using. We need to make sure that everything's interoperable. So if the sell side has a identity framework in place, that needs to be interoperable with the agency's ID framework or the trade desk ID framework and things like that. From a measurement perspective, back to currency, we have to have healthy competition. Without healthy competition, there's no way we're going to drive this industry forward. So I think everyone agrees that the path is we don't need to have something perfect right now, but what we need is the right setup and structure so that we embrace competition and start with where we're at today, but continue to move forward at a fast pace.
Fantastic. Claudio?
Yes, I would agree with that sentiment. I think it makes sense. Different marketers have different requirements. And so it makes sense to have different solution providers that have different areas of focus and different areas of strength. I think it's healthy for the ecosystem to have competition and innovation on the measurement. And on the attribution front, we've seen a lot of that over the last few years. I think we now need to push it into the currency space.
Awesome. Totally agree. And Mr. Dean, you get the last word.
Yeah, so I agree with what the others have said, so I won't repeat it. I'll just add that I would love to see the nutrition label for data, right? The thing that we talked about where for every data set you understand how it was collected, from where, and you have standardized attributes that describe everything about the data set that marketers, programmers, technologists need to understand about the data.
Fantastic. Well, I think we are absolutely perfectly at time. So I would just like to thank you all and say again how much I miss seeing you in person. So sometime soon. And thank Jane and the CIMM folks for the opportunity to do this. And Jane, back to you.
Hey, thanks very much, Jonathan, Claudio, Zeev, Mike, and David. That was terrific. And we can see that progress is being made, but we still have a way to go to get to deduplicated reach across TV and video. But I think they're right. Do work with what you got today, and then we'll just keep working on all these other solutions.